know if I'm audible.
Yeah, you're audible. Lasal.
Okay. Okay. So thank you. A very good evening and a warm welcome to everybody who has joined with us here today for yet another step in our series of virtual lectures organized by the Sri Lankan chapter of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network to celebrate the International Day for Biological Diversity that was on the past May 22nd. So for anybody who is joining with us for the first time, please let me go through a quick introduction of what is GYBN, or the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. So GYBN is a youth-led global network of individuals and youth organizations passionate and driven on conserving global biodiversity. GYBN has more than 50 chapters with 558 member organizations and about 1.2 million members in 172 countries. So today, we have an exciting and perhaps a fresh topic for some of you when it comes to biodiversity conservation. As you already know, we are going to be talking about preserving plant diversity through seed conservation and habitat restoration. And to share her knowledge with us on this important topic, today we have Professor Uromi Goodale from Department of Health and Environmental Sciences of the Xian-Jian-Tong Liverpool University, Suzhou, Jiangsu, China. Currently, she is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Sustainable Forestry, the chairperson of the ecology section of the Botanical Society of America, and a co-chair of the IUCN Seed Conservation Specialist Group. Throughout her career, she has been dedicated to facilitating students learning and engaged in activities that examine the interplay of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the STEM disciplines. So without further ado, I invite Professor Uromi to take over the meeting. Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lasal. Let me first share the screen. Can you see this, the PPT screen?
Yeah, we can see.
Great. So thank you very much for inviting me to this presentation. My name is Uromi Goodale. In addition to being Professor of Plant Ecology at Xian-Jiao-Tong Liverpool University, I'm also the co-chair of the IUCN Seed Conservation Specialist Group. And in this presentation, I would like to present to you a recent analysis we have done on the importance of seed conservation and habitat restoration, and an analysis which tries to look at where we need to do seed conservation and how we may try to prioritize that. I was also planning to present a little bit more on the research that has been done in my lab group, both at Guangxi University, where I was prior to coming to Xian-Jiao-Tong Liverpool University. In short, we call XJTLU. But I thought that given the present audience, I will focus on the recent analysis that's been done and then move on to try to explain a little bit about the IUCN Seed Conservation Specialist Group and the mission of the Species Survival Commission, and how maybe some of the youth in the audience could also get engaged in that organization and contribute to biodiversity conservation. So let me begin by saying that I am very grateful to the Global Youth Biodiversity Conservation Network, Sri Lanka chapter, for their kind invitation, especially Mr. Lasal Deomeka. And GYBN is the main youth caucus of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And that is a very important role that GYBN plays. And Sri Lanka chapter is a very active chapter in the Asian chapters. So it's a great honor to be invited. I also want to thank Othaniel Prathaban, Pasindu Dilshan, and others for supporting this very specific Zoom lecture, and the main coordinator. Thank you all. And if there are any youth in the audience that would like to get to know more about this organization, I have provided the link to their website, the global website, and the email to the Sri Lanka chapter. So if my voice is clear and the presentation is clear, I hope. It's been a long work day here for me, so I'm engaging with you, however, with a lot of hope and a lot of ideas that I hope that I can instill in the youth that are taking part in this presentation. So in talking about restoration and seed conservation, I would like to emphasize to you that it is very important to have a good native seed supply chain, because it is considered a key bottleneck that impedes restoration, reforestation, and afforestation efforts. In fact, a recent study done in the US about the potential for restoration and the ability for current seed supply chains to support restoration, it has shown that there has to be a lot of coordination, a lot of expertise development, and networking and sharing to be able to support the current targets for seed conservation. So the native seed supply is an increasing bottleneck, as I said, for seed restoration. And it is not just in the US as per this current analysis, but it is so for much of the world. And while seed sources are threatened by ecosystem loss and extreme weather and climate events, we must address these challenges if we are to move forward with seed conservation. So if we do so, it enables if we need to enable rapid scaling of projects by bolstering the shrinking seed supply threatened by ecosystem loss and extreme weather. As you may know, when we have extreme weather, sometimes it could be a big fire, other times it could be a long drought or flooding. We may lose the current seed supply ability of the mother plants. We may lose the ability for the stored soil seed bank to provide the next generation of plants. We may also lose the ability to have enough seed production that could support the coming years, because extreme weather events can affect the current mother plants that produce the seeds, ability for sometimes many years to produce seeds. And if you want to restore biodiversity and help protect the 30% of the world's tree species that are at risk of extinction, as per the IUCN Tree Specialist Group report that was published a few years back, we really need to address the global seed supply challenge. If we do so, again, what we can accomplish is enhancing resilience through site-specific restoration of native ecosystems. And that means that allows us to provide a range of ecosystem services and sustainable development benefits. Ecosystem services because seeds are the basis for ecosystems to provide the carbon chain that is required to build the food web and the interconnectivity from individual plants to populations to species to habitats and ecosystems. And they also are really important for us humans that cannot be separated from the ecosystems that depend on their sustainability for our sustainability. So they are having a good seed supply chain and thus being able to restore native ecosystems with native plants also provides us with the ability to attain sustainable development goals. So the work that I'm presenting today is a global analysis that was conducted with the leadership of Dr. Marian Chow, who is the seed bank manager and a leader in the in the US-based organization Terraformation, and many others, including Daniela Angelova, Alice DeSacco, Jill Wagner, Diana Castillo-Diaz, and Victoria Meyer were involved in this report. So it is a collaboration, a group collaboration of 7 experts that bring together expertise about seed banking, seed conservation, and restoration, as well as forestry and land management. The objective of this report was for us to be able to understand where we need seed banking to be more emphasized, and to achieve the global restoration potential, and also meet the United Nations Decade on Restoration targets. Convention of Biological Diversity also focuses on how we can address the biodiversity loss, and having the ability to procure seeds in a way that allows genetic diversity of a species, the diversity of an ecosystem to be preserved, not only for perhaps future use or to meet the current needs, the immediate needs of restoration, but also for doing research is a very important goal that we need to focus on in order to address these global management and conservation targets of different global instruments. So the Global Seed Bank Index was based on the golden rules for restoration that was published by DeSacco et al. In 2021. In order to protect, we must protect the existing forests first, and we have to aim to maximize biodiversity recovery and meet multiple goals. We need to work together. And the fifth rule, fifth rule says we should use natural regeneration whenever we can, but also select appropriate areas for restoration. The key word there is appropriate areas. We should use a mix of plant species to maximize biodiversity, and plan ahead for infrastructure. Use resilient plant material. What does that mean? Incorporate appropriate genetic diversity and pay attention to where we collect seeds from. That means to pay attention to the provenance. The 9th rule is to learn by doing. We need to extend not just our experience, but also incorporate research data that is existing and perform trials and adapt for management accordingly. So finally, we should make it pay. We need to make sure that the projects have economic sustainability and that they can gain income from carbon credits, non-timber forest productivity, watershed, and also cultural services. We should also make sure that we have economic benefits that reach not just those empowered communities, but also rural, poor local communities. So all these golden rules, 2 rules stand out when we talk about reforestation and restoration and using seeds and seed banking to achieve these outcomes. The 6th rule says that plant species, we need to maximize biodiversity. Therefore, we should use a mix of species, use as many native species as possible, and include rare, endemic, and endangered species. Thus, we hope to promote mutualistic interactions, avoid invasive species. And the 7th one says, use resilient plant material, incorporate genetic diversity, incorporate seeds that are harvested or taken and stored from multiple provenances. What does this mean? This means that we need to really plan ahead for infrastructure. So seed banking and having the knowledge, the know-how, the technical know-how, the biological know-how about species and their regeneration ecology. These are very important. They should be built into the projects. That means empowering young people such as yourself, such as those in the global, in this global network. And we also must make sure that when we procure seeds, we refer to the standards and ensure that our seeds have the quality, the viability, and which means the ability to regenerate when you actually plant them after storing them. And we must also ensure that we process the collected seeds in an efficient manner. This means that we need to have prior knowledge, provide this knowledge as training to those who want to be engaged, to multiple stakeholders from local communities, from local educators that may engage even the youth who are in schools and other programs, to national and global organizations that could be part of this network of seed sharing and knowledge sharing. So to go back to the main message, the main slide for this presentation, I want to reiterate again, if we were to address the restoration needs, to address the conservation needs and targets that we have set with global instruments, we need to address the global seed supply challenge. We must make sure that we can rapidly upscale. We must make sure that we not just reforest or restore, but we also bring in biodiversity so that especially when it comes to the tree species, 30% of the world tree species are at risk of extinction. And we must make sure that we enhance resilience by being site-specific, concentrating and understanding and incorporating native species to build up native ecosystems and thus ensure that they can provide ecosystem services and contribute to sustainable development goals. So this is the basic take-home message of this presentation. Now with that, I would like to move on to speak a little bit more about the analysis that we have just completed. But before I go there, I want to talk to the audience here about seed banking. So in order to restore, we need to have plants. In order to plant into a site, to have these plants, we either need to get them as plants from an organization or by collecting them or by using the seeds and growing them. So when we collect seeds, we sometimes cannot immediately use them. Some seeds we can and should be immediately used. But when we store them, we call it seed banking. So what is seed banking? Seed banking has 5 major steps. The very first step is that we need to do cleaning. We have to remove seeds from the fruits or dried capsules. We need to separate them from the chaff or pulp or outer covers and ensure, therefore, that seeds are less likely to rot or mold, so that sometimes we also not only do it to ensure that rusting and molding and deterioration of seeds happen. Sometimes we do that because when we store, if we have very large fruits or a lot of material that are seed outer covers, we do take up space. And space, when it comes to especially low temperature conservation of seeds, would be very expensive. So the first step ensures that we have seeds that are able to be stored for a longer term and use up the least amount of space. Second step is drying. We dry seeds under controlled temperature and humidity conditions until they reach appropriately usable relative humidity targets. Why is that? Again, a lot of wetness in the seeds also means that it provides possibility for bacterial and fungal growth, mold and rotting. But also, when you reduce the moisture content in seeds through practice, through research, we know for most seeds, it allows them to live in storage conditions in a viable manner for a longer time. And the third step is that we actually store the properly dried seeds after packaging them, and hopefully in airtight containers where possible. Some seeds could be just stored without this packaging, but not all. And it is important for us to understand that not all seeds are stored in the same way, but dry seeds can be stored by refrigeration or even frozen, and they are more likely to stay viable longer. Now, the next step is we store seeds, but we know we need them for either research or conservation or restoration efforts. We need to take them out of storage. And we can do that. And at the time that we take them out of storage, we may need to quickly test them using viability tests so that we understand what percentage of seeds that we have stored are able to be still viable, still usable, still live. Let me check the chat. I see that there are 2 messages. Okay, that doesn't seem to be for me. Okay, so yes, once we take them out, we need to test. Sometimes we may need to, we may want to, we may have already planned to store the seeds for a very long time, which means that we need to then understand with time, is there a possibility of these seeds losing their viability? So we may need to take a small amount of seeds, a sample of the seeds out of storage, test for viability. Thus, we get the understanding, are our stored seeds doing well? If they're not, and if they're rapidly losing their viability, we may need to make a decision to recollect and add to that seed collection. Finally, of course, we want to withdraw the seeds for planting while they are still viable, and then perhaps replenish those stocks that we have withdrawn in order to continue the cycle, continue the ability to have the stored seeds be there for research and conservation needs. So I hope this quick 5-step review allows you to understand what seed banking is. If you talk to your grandparents, maybe, if you have parents who are interested in making sure that they have gardens, who have agricultural knowledge, they will always tell you, yes, it's very important to be able to not only get the crops or get the plants that you want from the current crop, but also manage the seeds for storage for the next generation, for the next cycle, for the next season. So in summary, seed banking is the practice of cleaning, drying, storing, and testing seeds using methods that preserve seed viability so that they can be used in the future. So when it comes to storing native seeds, natural disasters like wildfires and hurricanes or diseases, they can devastate landscapes. And if native seeds are not banked for emergency response, not only just to restore for future climate change scenarios to address those, not only to restore for restoration projects, it can also be a very important resource to be able to address these kinds of emergency responses for restoration. So revegetation with non-native seeds can put ecosystems at further risk. That is important for us to understand. Ecosystem loss is also destroying native seed sources, and the use of fewer and often non-native species is leading to further losses of biodiversity and resilience, and potentially making these native landscapes more susceptible to the kinds of disasters such as wildfires and hurricanes and so on. And seed banking is not an extremely new science. It's a very well-established science. Seed vaults are usually for long-term storage, and most current seed banking efforts serve as repositories focused on protection of biodiversity and preservation of species. Some facilities are designed to store seeds for a century or more, such as the Svalbard seed bank vault that you see here. This Norway's Svalbard vault specifically focuses on crop seeds, while the Millennium Seed Bank in Kew Royal Botanical Gardens in UK stores billions of seeds of the world's native plants. And there are many other native seed restoration and storage facilities all over the world, some very well established by native communities that live close to these seed resources, such as a big forest or a large landscape of natural vegetation. I want to emphasize here that what we have focused in the IUCN Seed Conservation Specialist group is mainly focusing on the restoration of storage of wild plants for restoration. And restoration seed banking is slightly different from seed banking focused on conservation. In restoration seed banking, we want to be able to not just focus on the number of plants and ensuring that as many species are restored, we are also focusing on bulk, because when it comes to using seeds for restoration, based on the land area, based on the restoration target, we may need large number of seeds. We may also need specific groups of plants, seeds that we potentially use as the basis, the building blocks of that restoration project. So Merritt and Dixon in 2001, they showed that up to 90% of seeds can be wasted because when we use them for restoration projects, they are not stored properly, or they are stored in suboptimal seed storage, germination, or timing of use. That means we will have to harvest a lot in order to get the plants that we need for restoration. That means we are not being sustainable in our harvests. So our group focused on the importance of networking, not just networking for wild seeds for conservation, but through communication with other IUCN resource groups. We also understood, by understanding the need for achieving restoration targets, we also understood that the network of restoration seed banks can help avoid this waste. So Professor Dr. Marian Chow, who works in terraformation, they are specifically focusing on, as a private company, bringing together stakeholders that can support this kind of networking. The IUCN Seed Conservation Specialist Group also has a network that are specialists focusing on various aspects of seed conservation. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Basically, if we have a network, if we speak to each other, we can share, we can know who has the seeds, who has enough seeds that could be used now. We can swap, we can exchange. And this is, again, not a new idea. This is an ancient idea. Farmers always, in a community, shared seeds. They took care of each other's needs, and they also took care of the diversity of crops. This is something that farmers have done for centuries, perhaps even millennia, I could say. Here, we hope that a network of restoration seed banks can help avoid the kind of waste that is happening, that was reported by Merritt and Dixon. Simple, low-cost methods can provide a very steady supply of locally adapted plants for restoration and for emergency response. In our report that was headed by Marian and her team that I was a part of, I want to quote a few quotes that came out from this report. First, we cannot address climate change without simultaneously addressing biodiversity loss and vice versa. Minimizing seed waste to avoid overharvesting from wild plants is an urgent challenge to address if we are to meet international restoration goals. If we are to meet the goals and set by the Convention for Biodiversity Conservation, if we are to meet the Sustainable Development Goals that is set by United Nations. If seeds are both dried and stored at cold temperatures, many can be banked for years, decades, or even centuries. But how many seed banks are needed for this kind of global restoration targets to be achieved? Where? Where should we prioritize having seed banks that can support the storage of seeds that can be used for conservation, that can be used for restoration and reforestation and afforestation efforts? We first try to look at in this report that was published as a white paper that is available free to be downloaded as a PDF in the Terraformation website. We report that 410 seed banks around the globe currently store native seeds. Of these, 4 that are shown here in these yellow circles are large seed banks. And most seed banks are either 1 or 1 to 3. You can see that there's a big empty space here in Africa, some of the Mediterranean, and also some parts of the South America as well as Asia over here. Land restoration potential worldwide, when we assess that, what is the potential that we could achieve for land restoration? We found 2 important messages here. If you have a very large landscape, the restoration needs are higher because this is focusing on country-specific restoration needs. So the US, Brazil, and Australia had more restoration potential, and we excluded the boreal taiga, tundra, and ice and rock from this analysis. And we based this analysis from the report that was published by Bastian et al. In 2019. And we took this analysis and we then tried to understand how can we get at the answer to how many seed banks we need. We realized that the answer is very complex because it is based on highly variable factors. Factors such as, how many, what time, storage time, the size of the seeds, how long certain seeds may stay viable. A small restoration seed bank's average capacity over 10 years, we found, is about 53 million seeds. And different theoretical needs for seed scenarios are there in restoration projects. We assessed 5 scenarios, but we present here 3 scenarios. In the first scenario, where you have a low need or medium, the second one, or the high need, the area for restoration potential per seed bank is given in hectares here. The area for restoration potential per seed bank in acres, because different countries use different units, are given here. What we found is that the number of seed banks per million hectares, if we go with the low scenario, low need scenario, is about 46, and all the way to 450, almost tenfold for the high need scenario. This is, as I said before, our team led by Dr. Marian Chow, we realized that planting density, germination rate, and survival rate, these things can affect the final number we are achieving at. If our planting density is very high, we may need a high need scenario to be taken into account. If the germination rate of the plants, the seeds that we collect is very high, we may need lesser number of seeds. If the survival rate of those seeds that were planted after germination was very high, we may need to go with the lower scenario. Basically, at the end, based on the restoration potential that was published by Bastian et al. And the analysis that we did, we realized that we need, according to the low scenario, in the areas that are highlighted in gray, we may need 0 to 260 seed banks if the scenario is low. but it could be as high as 25,000 seed banks. And when it goes to some countries that have the higher restoration potential, or some areas that have the higher restoration potential, we may need uh, quite a large number of seed banks, up to 37,857 at the very high end for the high need scenario. So this means that we need thousands of seed banks in order to support the kind of restoration goals that we have set, whether it's about the restoration targets 2023, or achieving biodiversity conservation targets. What we need in terms of facilities for storing these seeds is very, very high. So we have high, but we also have to need to understand that although our analysis says we need a lot of seed banks, and that analysis is driven by area and country specific, we should understand that, as Strasbourg et al. Pointed out, the priority areas for restoration should also be based on where we have biodiversity, the tropics, where we can most impact climate change mitigation, where we can also minimize costs, because all of these ideas, we need economic strength to implement them. Restoration projects, many of you in this audience may be young people who are engaged in, or who are planning, or who are monitoring or assessing, or who are learning about how to effectively restore ecosystems, do restoration, achieve plant conservation or ecosystem conservation. And you will know how costly these things can be, and sometimes how difficult it can be to find the right funding. So given these needs, prioritization areas for restoration, this dark red color you see is the top 5% highest prioritization areas. And many of these areas, as you can see, are in tropical lands. And Sri Lanka is also highlighted here in the deepest red colors. So fewer seed banks are needed in the tropics, according to our analysis. But if we submit or establish or provide resources to have seed banks in the tropical landscape, that can provide a very high impact. So the core benefits of having seed banks, that seed banks are not just about the science and conservation and application of science. The collection, processing, and storing needs, and locally maintaining control of the seed supply is a critical component for successful projects. So resilient communities can be built surrounding the idea of providing seed banking needs. They can be cost effective because we avoid seed waste, and we can save money for buying seeds. And we can also prevent delays in restoration projects, because we can plan for seasonal variation and other factors that impact seed availability and minimize project stoppage or even slowdowns. And high quality seeds allow us to provide more local control and over the seed quality and seed viability. And seeds can be better adapted and resilient to local conditions if we are obtaining them from local provenances and are storing them around these local provenances or close to the seed restoration projects. It also provides increased biodiversity and ecosystem services, because many seed supplies offer limited number of species. Suppliers, they prioritize the economic factors when they store seeds for sale. And here, if it is focusing on collecting seeds for reforestation and restoration and conservation or service provision, we can collect the seeds needed to ensure the optimal species mix for healthy ecosystems. And it's also a business opportunity for local communities and local people. It can generate income from seed sales and seed storage to help fund operations. But these things need to be done carefully with proper planning, with bottom up as well as top down consideration. A steady supply of seeds are provided when we have a seed bank. They build the capacity for planting. There aren't always enough seeds to restore an entire native forest or an ecosystem at once. Seed banks allow partners to collect seeds when they're available before they may begin their restoration projects, and they can also eliminate gaps in propagation and planting. Seeds can be accessed regardless of poor harvesting seasons and without sacrificing biodiversity. If we do it through seed banking and collect seeds in the proper way, and also train the people such as yourselves, the young people, train communities that are relying on these ecosystem services, on these ecosystems that they live close to. And they can also, as we earlier said, provide a rapid response for natural disasters like wildfires, hurricanes, and diseases, and allow us the opportunity to restore and quickly replant these areas. And native seeds are not banked for emergency response. If we don't do that, revegetation with non-native seeds could be potentially providing a risk for the native ecosystems. And they are also about seed preservation. It's a critical tool to conserve seeds, a precious resource that can be used for future generations under changed climate change scenarios, as well as for research needs. So it's a priority in the global strategy for plant conservation. And seed banks can help build more resilient communities because they positively impact areas such as health, food security, education, economic growth, and support a number of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The two, zero hunger, quality education, gender equality, decent work, industry innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, life below water, life on land, as well as partnerships for achieving the goals. So again, this is our take-home message of the work that we have done, conducted by the Terraformation Group that Dr. Marian Chow works with, and the IUCN Seed Conservation Specialist Group. Here I want to take a minute to thank a very special person, Jill Wagner, who has been a leader on the ground, on the booths, proponent of seed banking and seed restoration, who has given us a lot of good ideas, and she was an inspiration for us to do this work. Thank you, Jill, if you're in the audience. Now I want to quickly transition and take about 5 minutes to talk to you about the IUCN Species Survival Commission, which has its vision to develop a just world that values and conserves nature through positive action to reduce the loss of diversity on Earth. As the IUCN Seed Specialist Group, we have about 140 specialist groups in the Species Survival Commission and red list authorities and task forces. Each group focuses on a taxonomic group or a disciplinary issue such as the sustainable use of livelihoods, etc. So here's the link for you to go and explore a little bit more. And our group, Marian, as I said before, is the co-chair, and newly minted PhD, Dr. Dustin Walkes is the deputy chair, and we established in 2017 with about 61 specialists, and we try to connect experts, identify gaps, and develop best practices. And we have about 100 members currently spanning across 26 countries, 24 countries, and 6 continents. Here's our website if you're interested in joining us and supporting us and networking, or if you need us to connect you to a specialist for a project that you're conducting for biodiversity conservation or restoration or reforestation or management, please let us know. You can go to the seedconservation.org Our mission is to promote seed conservation by providing a network for knowledge sharing in different ecosystems around the world and aid in prioritization, capacity building, and development of best practices. And here I want to go back to the idea of seed conservation as is defined for us. It's defined as banking or preserving seeds of wild species, particularly those that are threatened or near threatened, primarily for ex situ germplasm storage and future introduction. Here's a beautiful picture of seeds that are dust seeds that are very, very, very small seeds that you can't even see to your eye. My collaborator, Professor Gao Jiangyun, is an expert in orchid conservation, and we have worked together in orchid conservation for a very long time. And I'm not going to introduce us a little more here. I've already talked to you about Marian and myself, but Deputy Chair Dustin is at the National Tropical Botanical Garden in island of Kauai, Hawaii, USA, and Catherine O'Donnell is the head of seed conservation and plant health at Botanical Gardens Conservation International. We are hosted by the Secretariat in BGCI. So we have also a link to our group there. If you would like to get to know more about BGCI, you can go to this link here. And we have focal points for conservation planning, Dr. Pedro Leon Lobos, and a focal point for early career engagement, Dr. Diana Castillo-Diaz. I encourage you to go and visit our website and connect with Dr. Diaz and learn more about how young people, the youth, the people that I'm talking to here today, can engage with our work. I'm not going to go more into the rest of our work, but I want to quickly tell you that there's a quadrennium 4-year cycle framework that we focus on. Our current quadrennium is 21-25, and we have 17 targets that we want to achieve. And we go by the species conservation cycle. Network and capacity building is in the middle of assessing or understanding where we are with a species or sometimes an ecosystem, planning and developing action plans and policy initiatives to accomplish conservation goals, and then actually implementing them and providing advice. And to do all of this, it is very important that we are able to communicate, to raise awareness and improve connections, collaborations, and provide information. So I'm very happy to be part of your presentation in this lecture series today. And for networking, we are very interested in having anyone in the audience who is an expert or has technical engagement or skills or community interest in seed banking. Please do connect with us. We have the Seed Conservation Specialist Group directory that can be used for searching and understanding where the seed conservation community is and how perhaps they could support you. At present, you can see, and in this, I just want you to focus here on South and East Asia. We have about 24% of our membership there. However, we do not have enough members from West Asia, Eastern Europe, and Northern and Central Asia, and Africa. If you know of people, or if you are a person from these geographical regions, we very much welcome your participation, as we want to be an inclusive, engaging, equitable community that focus on solving this global issue of biodiversity loss, climate change, and the need for sustainability for our existence. And here's our email. You can write here in order to communicate with us and send us your CV if you're an expert, or a letter that explains how and why you would like to be engaged with us. And here's the view of our directory. Again, we have not as many members from the African region, from Oceanic Islands, West Asia, and Eastern Europe, and Northern and Central Asia. It's mostly North American and Caribbean and Western Europe centered. So it is an invitation to you. If you would like to be part of this directory and be registered in it, you can use this link and go and submit your application. In the assess component, we are now working on focusing on regional and tropical gap analysis. The COVID time, pandemic time was a very difficult time for us to accomplish these goals, but now we are working back up again. We want to improve inclusion of seed conservation in the red list assessments. If you're in the audience assessing the red list and you would like to have some advice or expertise or support from our group, please let us know. And we also want to focus on improving the plant search database that is maintained by Botanical Gardens Conservation International. And the other ones are not the codrinium targets for this codrinium, but we do want to have more members. This published tropical gap analysis is a white paper. It is not yet peer review published, but we wanted to put it out there so it can be immediately used, and it is free of charge, can be downloaded from the Terraformation website. And I also want to mention that the summary of this as a one-page policy document was published in Science recently. One of our other targets under assess is to include the SSC affiliation in the research publications. So if you're a member of our group, we will submit your publication to the IUCN library as a repository, which will allow you to gain a lot of visibility for your work. We are working on creating guidelines on seed conservation, and we are currently collaborating with the biobanking group to develop a document. So if you are interested in any engagement opportunities, please do let us know. We have a newsletter, we have a website, and we have a social media presence. We also try to offer annual meetings for our membership that would be good opportunities for the youth in this group. Current newsletters, we have finalized 2. They are again available free of charge as PDFs in our SCSG website. We want to improve our website. That is one of our other goals. So if there are young people who have social media skills, we are very excited to be able to collaborate with you all. At present, we have had a lot of members join when we started the website, but currently our membership has not increased that much. So do help us spread our news about our work. And if you are a student who has completed an undergraduate college degree and is looking for opportunities for master's research, I would also like to tell you that I'm looking for some students, and we have started a new master's program at XJTLU. Here's a link. Do go and check it out and email me or connect with me if you are interested. That is it for now. I think I have taken a lot of time, not so much time for questions, but I thank you, the audience, for listening, and I would like to hand over to Lasal and for opening up for potential questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor Uromi. So if any of the participants have any questions, you can unmute yourselves and ask now. Yeah, and
maybe there are some questions in the chat.
yes, yes, we have received a few questions through the chat, so I'll move on to that now. Somebody's asking, how can policymakers address the challenges of ensuring equitable access to seed resources? Did somebody ask something?
Lasal, why don't you continue?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. How can policymakers address the challenges of ensuring equitable access to seed resources and participation in habitat restoration projects, particularly for marginalized communities and indigenous people who may have traditional knowledge and expertise in these areas?
So one of the most important ground rules or foundations of working on conservation is to make sure that we have engagement of all stakeholders. All stakeholders include the indigenous people and the communities that are living close to sometimes or within protected areas or large sorts of forests. Policymakers can engage them, developing policies, developing requirements for projects that are funded through governments and through specific policies of governments. When you develop these projects, making sure that there are requirements that the projects need to meet, such as communication and engagement of local communities, communication and engagement and collaboration through negotiations and good relationships with the local communities. Having opportunities or providing opportunities to let the local communities, the local people, give feedback at the beginning of projects, when the projects are ongoing, at the end, is very important, because sometimes if we were to conduct projects without engaging local communities, if they don't feel that they have a stake in the project that is happening, we may not find long-term sustainability of these projects. Local people and local communities may not have a PhD, may not have spent years in a university understanding the science behind a species or a seed, but they have local knowledge, they have experiential knowledge, and they have knowledge that they have orally brought from generation to generation. Being able to listen to this knowledge, understand it, understand the scientific basis for it is also very important. And maybe one of the most important things you do when you start a project may end up you not wasting time. They may simply say, oh, this seed is not going to work over here. Why? Because in this year I did this, in this year I did that, and this is what happens to this seed. If you were to plant it here, it is more likely to be successful somewhere else. Even if this knowledge or understanding may not be very clear to the outsider, the scientist that comes in to conduct the project, being able to have this sort of information that can be built into the hypothesis of the work you do is very important for you to avoid making mistakes that maybe generations have already made and figured out what to do. As a scientist, when I go somewhere to work, that is one of the most important things I do. Connect with the local people and be able to talk with them. And I am a scientist who is working in China, a country that hosts me. I consider myself a host here, and I always want to understand, what does the Chinese people or the community that I'm working with want? I consider myself as a invited guest that is there to support what they want to accomplish. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do, how to do, where to do. I'm here to be a collaborator. I'm here to be a partner. I'm here to be a supporter for them to achieve their conservation targets. So this is very important for policymakers to understand. And if you think about where we can implement this is when we provide funding, when it becomes a requirement to get funding, to continue to be funded. And if we put in good steps, concrete steps that allow the funders to assess the project, not just from the success on the ground, from the perspective of faunal and floral diversity and faunal and floral conservation, but also community engagement, community support, and community resilience. That will be the best way to do it. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, madam. And then there's another one. Are there any specific challenges or considerations that researchers and practitioners should keep in mind when implementing seed conservation and habitat restoration initiatives in urban environments?
That's a really good question. So urban environments can be quite a variety. You know, urban environments can go from extreme heat islands where there's lots of concrete and lots of buildings and roads, to urban environments that are built around the idea of 15 minutes. Within 15 minutes, we'll be able to walk anywhere and conduct our work. Urban environments that are built around the idea of sustainability, such as urban environments in Hong Kong, Singapore, and some European countries. So if we are going to work on seed conservation and urban environments, it's very important to understand what kind of urban environment we have in order to be able to incorporate this into the planning environment. If it is possible to restore urban environments from heat islands to urban ecosystems by incorporating plant species, by incorporating urban microecosystems, that would be the best. And if there is no space, there's on the ground no space, then we need to think about block by block changing the way we use the urban space. And that is a very long-term process. The university that I graduated from with my PhD, Yale University, has an urban resources institute, which has conducted its work for over now about 30 years, or maybe even more. I do not remember clearly. And with time, I have seen, as beginning my years of study in 1999 as a master's student to now, how this institute, this group, with the collaboration of the community, the policymakers and the governing leaders and the university, have slowly changed New Haven into a more livable environment. And this is very important for us because we are rapidly moving into more than 50% of the human population living in urban environments. So being able to make urban environments livable, being able to make urban environments be able to be resilient for climate change, and having spaces and areas where humans and other biota can have shelter is very, very important. Thank you.
Clear. And we have received one more question, and I think this one will give a nice wrap up to our session today as well. From your experience, what are the key factors that determine the success of habitat restoration projects, particularly in relation to plant species recovery and ecosystem functionality?
So I have to say that I haven't been actively engaged in a restoration project. For my PhD thesis research work, I conducted research on how to use pioneer species for restoration. And I have a academic understanding about the subject, but on the ground, I have not worked long-term on a restoration project. Having said that, I think the key factors are making sure that we understand what is our site and understand how to build the restoration project around the site specificity. Site specificity also means that we need to use the species, the right foundation species that can be planted, that can be supported, that has the ability to grow in that site. So considering site specificity, considering species specificity, as we said before, making sure that we have a mix of species, not monocultures or one or two, and understanding what is our objective, what is our goal, what do we want this restored site to look like, and having a reference point and going and planning our project around that reference point, as well as we discussed earlier, engaging local communities, policymakers, decision makers, all stakeholders, and making a project that is sustainable, that has the potential to succeed because it is built on good understanding of community needs and built on good understanding of the ecological principles of restoration is very important. That is my answer. However, I have not been practically involved in a long-term restoration project. I am more a scientist that looks at restoration from the perspective of how we can work on the biophysiology of the regeneration ecology of the plant species that can be used in restoration.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we were able to answer all the questions we received. Yes. So I think we can wrap up the session now. And before finishing, I'd like to thank Professor Uromi. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for taking your time to share that knowledge and your expertise with us. And also I'd like to thank all the participants who joined with us today for this meeting as well. And I hope we were able to share very valuable knowledge, and we were also able to inspire you on your journey on saving global biodiversity as well.
Thank
And
you,
one more
Lasal.
thing before yes, thank
Go
you,
ahead.
madam. Thank you very much.
May I say something?
Sorry.
May I say something?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. So what I have presented today, I'm just one person standing on the shoulders of giants on a large body of work of various scientists from all over the world. But also, I'm inspired by the students that I've worked with. I want to mention Francesco Martini, Tiana Castillo-Diaz, Chen Huayang, Feng Chuangwei, Zhou Chabo, who have already graduated from my group, and the current members of the group that are working on projects from seed conservation, seed biophysiology, regeneration ecology in forests, as well as specific plant species and plant groups such as orchids, figs, that are working in my group. So if you're interested in these kinds of topics, I welcome you to please connect with me. And thank you again, Lasal, for providing this opportunity. One last message I have is specifically for the Sri Lankan youth. I know that it is a very difficult time in your lives. You have gone through as a country. We have gone through. I was born there and raised there. We have gone through a very difficult time. However, I want you to remember that some problems are time specific. Time will see you through. Don't get discouraged. Be encouraged. I was born in this small island nation, which is an amazing testament to what biodiversity and nature can do to a human being. I land in Sri Lanka, I open my eyes and I see the sunshine, and I'm always filled with happiness. So I wish you all courage, strength, stamina, and endurance to see through and accomplish your dreams and goals and be champions for biodiversity, not only for Sri Lanka, but for this beautiful blue dot that we are part of. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, madam. That means a lot. And before we go, one more thing. The link to our WhatsApp group, the Gibbon Sri Lanka WhatsApp group, is in the chat. So if anybody would like to join the group, you can go through the link and join our WhatsApp group, and it will allow you to stay connected and stay in touch with what we do and our work in the future as well. So I think we can wrap up now. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for joining with us, and stay tuned. We will be back with some more important discussions on biodiversity conservation as well. So good night for now. Stay safe and keep protecting Mother Nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much.